What's going on, everyone? In today's video, I want to talk about kept confidence. There's been a lot of talk in the community about this hand cannon. Is it good? Is it not? With even some creators calling it mid. So I'm kind of here to give my thoughts on it. We're going to talk about a couple of things, talk about the role you should be crafting in PvP. And I think that what's cool about this hand cannon is that there's a couple of things you can do in terms of the role, depending on the character you're using or class you're using, exotics you're using, and you can really craft this hand cannon to best fit that. And then we're going to kind of compare it to its competition, things like Austringer, like Rose, and see how it's different from those two hand cannons, how it's better, how it's worse, and why some people may feel it's a not so good hand cannon, especially in comparison to something like Rose, which I think is really the standard right now. And kind of this breakdown, some recommendations I have for the weapon to make it feel as good as possible and make it feel not so mid. So we're going to jump in. Any gameplay you see is just going to be some clips of trials I was played a couple of hours of trials with this weapon, really get a feel for it, and help us determine, is it worth crafting? And if you do even craft it, is it worth using at that point? So let's jump into the PvP roles. So we're going to jump out of here. We're going to go into D2 Foundry. And so, excuse me, the role I really like for this weapon, first of all, is going to depend on a couple of things. Because the biggest thing or downfall in this weapon is the handling. 45 handling is kind of on the low side. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about Rose and how good it feels, not to get too ahead of things, they talk about, or what they're feeling is how good the handling is. So the role I recommend, if you're not using something like Ophidian Aspects on Warlock that boosts handling, is going to be small bore, accurized rounds, quick draw, and Eye of the Storm. Of course, we're going to have enhance intrinsic, almost enhance all the things. And so as you can see here, quick draw is going to make it feel a lot snappier in terms of pulling it out. It's not going to really feel that much snappier overall in terms of the ADS speed and stuff like that, but that's where your targeting mods and dexterity mods specifically for like a strand hand cannon are going to help it feel a lot better. And so this is really the role I would recommend. With this, you get a nice balance of range and stability, as we know helps with that flinch resistance. You could go just straight range, but again, then you're gonna lose some of that stability without gaining much more range. You're only gaining about 3 range, so it's not really worth it. And again, definitely don't want to do full bore, even though again, that's gonna push our range up a little bit to about 34.9 meters. The stability hit and handling hit, which is even more, is not really worth the trade-off. First, if we go small bore, we're basically a little under a meter maybe in terms of difference. So I think the trade-off there is worth it to keep our stability nice and high. Now, if we're running Ophidian Aspects, or you don't mind the slower feel, which I think is what gets a lot of people on this hand cannon, you could run Killing Wind. Again, if we get Killing Wind and get that proc, that's going to shoot our range up to 93, which is pretty great. On top of the fact that's also going to get us 40 handling. So immediately once we get a kill, it'll further address all the issues we have stat-wise with this weapon. And again, just having something like Ophidian Aspects, you're gonna get that plus 30 handling, so it's gonna make it feel substantially better. So that's kind of what I recommend between the two different roles, and that's what I really like about this hand cannon. I'm almost tempted to craft 2, so if I ever don't run Warlock, which is pretty rare, I can have a quick draw one to make it just feel a little bit more snappy switching between weapons. So I feel like the ADS speed and all that stuff I can adjust to. It's the swapping between and like that stow speed, especially when you're switching like a shotgun or something to quickly finish off a kill, or shotgun and then switch back to your hand cannon. That is pretty nice to have. And so I would definitely think these are kind of your two best options in terms of crafting, depending on the class you're playing. Now let's get into comparing it to the kind of main competition, if you will. So we're going to be comparing it to Rose, and we're going to be comparing it to Austringer, and you'll see I've crafted a different Austringer here as well, since rangefinder isn't the end-all be-all anymore. And so as you can see, let's kind of just break down the stats. So going off of, we'll use the Killing Wind roll for Kept Confidence. For Rose, I'm doing a similar small bore, range masterwork, accurized rounds, slide shot with Eye of the Storm, and then Austringer actually did something a little different here. Hammer Forge, because the base stability is already pretty high. Hammer Forge, ricochet rounds, Eye of the Storm, and Zen Moment, which I think is really good and kind of slept on a little bit on hand cannons right now. And then I think the enhanced intrinsics, yeah, with range as well. And so looking at this, let's go a comparison here, and you'll kind of see a couple of things. You're going to see a big cluster of green, meaning these numbers are higher on Rose and Austringer. And I think this is where people and some creators may feel that this hand cannon is not as good, or even, yeah, like some of the community may feel that this Kept Confidence is not as good as Rose or Austringer, is because this cluster of things right here. And so it's a couple of things I want to highlight that I think are the reason for that. I think one is the handling, specifically on Rose. Talking about Rose for a second, I think the thing why Rose is a standard is people are like, man, it just feels so good. I feel like my shots connect. I think people are feeling two things on that. I think they're feeling the base high handling, because depending on what you're running, your handling could be much higher than 60, and 60 is a pretty healthy handling stat. And then the other thing they're feeling is the aim assist. The aim assist is 85, so that's 10 more aim assists than Kept Confidence. On top of the fact, if you add any targeting mods, you throw targeting adjuster on there, any of those things are going to further amplify the stickiness and how like Rose just feels like it just grabs people with like its bullets when you're aiming. That's the aim assist that you're feeling. So I think that's why Rose feels so good, is because of that handling stat and that aim assist stat. Those are two things that really stand out. For Austringer, the biggest thing again is going to be just kind of like how all these stats are just a touch higher. I think in the stability as well helps with like the recoil and things like that. And so I think Austringer, especially when you factor in things like Zen Moment, really help. The recoil direction is a little bit higher. I honestly don't know if that's enough to make a difference. To me, I don't really notice it all that much, 91 versus 95. So I'm not going to really read too much into that. I also think with Rose, you get the higher base airborne effectiveness of 20. So just a little bit. So again, maybe not so much versus Kept Confidence, but I think between Austringer and Kept Confidence, they're going to feel very similar. I think Austringer, because of Zen Moment, as a straight dueling weapon, might feel slightly more consistent, and you might get that flinch resistance, which will be nice. So you're going to win a lot of those gunfights, and then you throw an Eye of the Storm, and then it's just a dueling beast. But I think Rose versus Kept Confidence, a lot of people are going to feel Rose feels a lot better because of that handling and aim assist stat. And so I think that's really the difference between these three. I don't think that Rose is substantially better than Kept Confidence outside the fact that you get slide shot. I think the fact that slide shot, for people that are like, I want range, your sweaty tryhards, they're like, I need max range for picking people off. Slide shot is really going to make Rose a solid choice and probably the best choice, honestly, overall. I'm not here to say that I think Kept Confidence is better than Rose. I think Rose is still, out of these three, the best because of some of the things I've already mentioned. But don't let that make you believe if you already don't have a good Rose, or if you have had a chance to get a good Rose or don't have a Rose at all, unfortunately, then that Kept Confidence can't be another great option. It is going to be very, very good. It will be close to Rose in a lot of ways, but you're just going to have to do a little bit more to make it work. So now that we've talked about the role you should get for PvP and the kind of different role options we have, we've kind of compared Kept Confidence to the competition. How good is it actually, and what can we do to make it the best it can be? And it's gonna be pretty simple. I think Kept Confidence is a very good hand cannon. I think it is very good. I think it's just in comparison to some of these other ones, it's missing one or two key ingredients in terms of handling, in terms of overall aim assist, that make it feel great. And so that's where I'd recommend, again, dexterity mods to make it feel as snappy as possible, making sure you're running strand targeting mods so that the ADS speed is a touch quicker. Definitely running some strand unflinching, really just building around this hand cannon just like you would any other. And I think the biggest thing is the mod you use on the hand cannon itself. And I think what I would recommend is using a targeting adjuster mod. You'll see in some of the gameplay I'm using backup mag just because I like to shoot my gun a lot. I actually went away from that over time. I actually went to a targeting adjuster mod just because I was noticing the aim assist stat. And I think once I did that, combined with the targeting mod, which also help with the aim assist, you'll find the hand cannon is going to feel a lot better, feel a lot stickier. And so at that point, it's just really crafting the role that is based around the class you're using to really compensate for that handling. If you're not using something like Fading Aspects, that's where I'd really recommend Quick Draw. Having Killing Wind is nice, and getting that 90 plus handling, or handling 90 plus range when you get a kill, it does feel good. But I think overall, 90% of the time, you're going to be within the optimal range of this hand cannon if you're using it right. You really shouldn't be challenging something at 90 range anyway, and if that person's shooting you back, chances are they have a more effective ranged weapon anyway. And so overall, I think Kept Confidence is a really good hand cannon. Don't listen to the haters in terms of how good this hand cannon is or isn't. I think it's more about finding the right role, using the right mods to really get the most out of this hand cannon. But let me know what you guys think about it down below. Have you tried Kept Confidence? What have you crafted? And how do you think it compares to weapons like Austringer and Rose?